Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes. Here are the three big stories for today. So the first story, Russia is producing 3 times as many artillery shells as the US and Europe. This is bad. In the short term, it's terrible, especially while they're running low. But it also means that Russia can't produce, like they're already producing more. And if the Europeans and the Americans start producing, it's going to push the Russians to the point where they're going to have a harder and harder time keeping up. But that's if the Europeans and Americans show that they have the political will to do that. In the meantime, they're starting to get the message, the Europeans, the Americans, in the same way that Russia has reoriented or reconfigured its supply chain, the West is starting to get the message as well. So this was really interesting. Consumers are still paying the price for Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a result of supply chain disruptions caused by the war and the West's drastic sanctions on Moscow. More than half of UK retailers and exporters have been affected by the disruption of the Red Sea trade from Houthi rebels. It found that the cost of shipping a container from Asia to Europe had risen by as much as 300%. Talk of globalization has been succeeded by prescriptions for onshoring, friendshoring, or at least nearshoring. So friendshoring would be like making sure you're only operating with countries that are friendly to you, or nearshoring, these countries that you can count on. The EU decided that decoupling from China was too strident, but pursues de-risking. Last year, trade between the US and China fell by 17%, albeit from a record high of $2 billion a day the previous year, with Mexico becoming the biggest exporter of goods to the US for the first time in 2 decades. This is not so much deglobalization as what has been termed glocalization, an unlovely hybrid term that perhaps accurately reflects the awkward mix of forces in play. So the headline here was that supply chains, they not only need to be just in time, that's the way that we've worked our supply chains, but just in case. And we need to be aware of the possibilities of things that can go wrong, particularly with China as we look into the future. Okay, second story. While the Polish protesting farmers are announcing that they're not going to allow a single truck to leave Ukraine through their territory, Duda and Tusk, Duda is the Polish president and Tusk is the prime minister, are visiting the U.S. to lobby for Ukraine. The leaders will reaffirm their unwavering support for Ukraine's defense against Russia's brutal war of conquest, according to a White House press briefing. They'll also meet with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Hopefully they can have some impact. Okay, third big story. Putin could win over 80% of the vote. Well, of course he can win over 80% of the vote, but they think that this is like a good thing. See how popular he is? Now, it made me think, when have you ever seen anybody win that much in a democratic election? You haven't. There's a reason why you haven't. This is American presidential elections, and the percent of the popular vote won. Well, okay, George Washington, yeah, because he was essentially, nobody was running against him, right? And then 100%. And then you see John Adams at 53%. And then you see Thomas Jefferson with 61%. He was pretty popular. Jefferson the second time, 72%. Madison at 64%. Then you see James Madison again at 50%, just squeaking by. Monroe at 68%. James Monroe the second time actually had 80%. That's big. That was the high water mark ever. But then as you go through the centuries, you don't see anything like that at all. And when you get to the 20th century, I mean, if you're getting 60%, it's pretty significant. Lyndon Johnson got 61%. And then Jimmy Carter had 50%. Reagan had about 50%. And then Reagan had 58%. And then George W. Bush had 53 and Bill Clinton had 43. It was a three-way race there. Bill Clinton the second time had 49% to Bob Dole's 40%. Yeah, I mean, and when you get down to the last one, Joe Biden only had 51 to Trump's 46.9. So, I mean, to win by 80% or with 80% of the vote, it just doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it's a sign that there's some kind of something going wrong in a true democratic republic. But this isn't a true democratic republic. The boxes will be stuffed and Putin will run a victory lap and he'll make a show of it because he thinks that by winning by such a big margin, it makes him look not like a crook, but like he's successful. And those are the three big stories for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.